We've got our first set of pickup recommendations of the second half here. Less than half the season remaining, but still plenty of time to make a push down the stretch. We'll give you our recommendations here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Draftkings Pick6. Erik, Halterman, and Ryan Boyer back on the mic here for the first show of the second half. Ryan, did you enjoy your break? Come back all refreshed?
Refreshed, batteries recharged, ready to go. Let's have some more baseball games.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed my brief break with the RotoWire crew down in Las Vegas. Managed to not lose money. Not gambling very much is a big key there. That's my big secret. Fun watching the All-Star game and the Derby on the big screen with some colleagues. But let's get back to work here. We've got a half a season left to play. Well, not really. I think every team's got about 65 games left. So we got 40% of the season or so left to play. But that means there's still time for these pickups to do a meaningful amount of help to your team in the second half. We will get to those soon, and it'll be an interesting group this week, I think, with, 1 day's worth of games since the last pickup show. Guys haven't exactly put up a lot of stats or anything like that, so we've dug a little bit deeper, finding a handful of stashes to round out today's list. But first, as always, the headlines. We'll start with Bo Bichette, and there haven't been many positive Bo Bichette headlines this season, and that's not going to change now. Landed on the injured list today with a right calf strain. Suffered that on the first game back in the second half. He's already had a rather disappointing season, both on the field and his ability to stay healthy as well. I guess we haven't seen that this is a particularly long-term issue yet, so if you've got Bichette, you just hold on to him and hope that he comes back soon and is himself, I guess. But, man, I'm not very optimistic.
Yeah, I know that was I think he missed the last 4 games or something like that before the break. And obviously the additional rest during the All-Star break, and still clearly was not over that calf issue. So like you mentioned, haven't seen the severity of the strain yet, but I'm not terribly optimistic either. I mean, the track record prior to this year anyway says that you should do whatever you can to hang on to him. And certainly if you have the IL space, that would be advisable. But it's been not a great year for Bo Bichette, certainly. We've seen him involved in trade rumors. I mean, I would think in addition to his value just probably being down because he hasn't played well this year, this injury might nip those in the bud. I guess could depend on the severity of the strain, but yeah, hang on to Bo Bichette. I don't know that there's really anything else you can actionable other than stash him and hope he comes back soon.
Yeah, I think I'd be hanging on. I think I would be doing that even though there's a real chance it ends up being the wrong move. I mean, you could see, given that, again, with the timing of the injury, making a trade less likely. What happens if Bichette just doesn't bounce back that quickly, and now we're looking at a month from now and the Blue Jays have slipped further out of the race? I don't think it's the likely scenario, but the downside here is that he just never really comes back for any meaningful amount of time because it's a completely lost season for both him and the Jays. I wouldn't be dropping him expecting that to happen, but if it does, yeah. I think there's at least a 10% chance that something like that happens just because of the way the Jays season has gone. Another AL East team whose season hasn't gone the way they wanted to is the Rays, and they will now be without Yandy Diaz for at least the near future. He was placed on the restricted list today due to a personal matter with these situations. Always hard to tell exactly when the player is going to be back. Is it going to be a couple days or a few weeks or more? Curtis Mead, though, got the call up. Is that the fantasy takeaway here, that we should see if Curtis Mead sticks around past this weekend? Or should we be adding him now? Or should we just be taking a wait-and-see approach?
Yeah, wait and see, I guess. Curtis Mead has still got some prospect stock, I guess, but he's been quite bad during his chances at the major league level. I wouldn't be rushing to pick him up. I don't necessarily think, I know he's in the lineup today, but I don't necessarily think he would be an everyday guy for however much time Yanni Diaz ultimately misses. We've seen Isaac Paredes slide over to first base the last 2 days. I believe Ahmed Rosario's at third base today. Can't remember who played third base yesterday, but there should be a handful of, the Rays obviously like to move pieces around already. I will be mentioning one guy later in the priority section who could see a little uptick in playing time as a result of this. But yeah, it's a bit of a sticky situation, I guess, that Yanni Diaz managers might find themselves in, because depending on your platform, I don't know that you can stash him anywhere while he's on the restricted list. Are those utilized like IL spots? I don't think they are.
Yeah, I think it may depend on the platform, but I don't think they're count as IL everywhere. That's for sure.
Right. So maybe vary from league to league how you can handle that, and it's just up in the air as to how much time he might miss. I mean, it's just the Rays have only said he's dealing with a personal matter. And not in New York with the team. So you assume he's at minimum going to miss at least this series against the Yankees, and kind of TBD after that.
Yeah, I might try to hold him on through this weekend. And then if it turns out that it's going to be an extended absence of who knows how long, maybe make the call next weekend. Speaking of extended absences, we've got some updates on some players' rehab. Tristan Casas, not necessarily the most positive update. It looked earlier in the week that he maybe was about to begin a rehab assignment, but it's been clarified since then that Casas is not particularly close. Still feeling some pain in his side. He's hitting off a tee, taking a soft toss, but a return probably sometime in September, which would mean wouldn't go out and grab Tristan Casas yet if he's sitting out there.
Yeah, and I guess he's still feeling discomfort in his ribs, so it's still not fully healed yet. And Alex Cora said it would be a while till he'd be able to resume or begin a rehab assignment. And I think a reporter asked him whether September was a realistic goal, as you mentioned, and he just kind of said there's really no point in speculating, and until he's ready for a rehab assignment. And I mean, that's rather vague, but I mean, based on that, I certainly wouldn't be counting on him coming back anytime soon. He's obviously missed considerable amount of time already, so he's going to need a good number of rehab at bats, one would assume. And what is he ultimately going to look like once he comes back? I mean, I've been stashing him in a couple leagues. Might have to make a tough decision in one of those leagues with him. But yeah, not positive vibes for Tristan Casas right now. It might encourage the Red Sox, if they ultimately buy, to kind of shore up first base a little bit with someone better than Dom Smith.
Yeah, Dominic Smith continues to be the guy there, at least against righties. He's got a 692 OPS, tied for his best mark since 2020. So I would certainly think the Red Sox might want to upgrade with someone who could stick around in a part-time role, get the occasional at-bat, maybe a couple places after Casas returns. But hey, if you're looking for more positive injury returnee news, Mike Trout approaching a rehab assignment. News was that he's aiming to return by the end of July. That's exciting. I don't think many of us have a lot of optimism remaining for Mike Trout, and I think most of us probably are adding 2 weeks onto any projected return date. But still, there was, with any Mike Trout injury, there's at least part of you that wonders, all right, I guess that's it for the year, because when he comes back, the Angels are going to be 70 games out, and why would they bother bringing him back? Well, seems like we might at least get to see 6-8 weeks of Mike Trout down the stretch, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that news caught me a little by surprise. I wasn't expecting his timetable to be that optimistic. Maybe I'm just, as you mentioned, just kind of baked in pessimism in regards to Mike Trout. But he was actually running again prior to getting hurt. 6 stolen bases in 29 games, which was, basically matched his total from, maybe exactly matched his total from the last 4 years combined. And he mentioned that he wanted to run more. He is coming off knee surgery, so maybe those plans are altered once he does come back. But I think we all still believe that Mike Trout is going to be a really good hitter when he is on the field. And if he's stealing bases again, still has the potential to be an elite fantasy contributor. Understand if you're exercising some caution. I mentioned that I'm doing the same, but certainly if he's out there and available to be stashed in your league, you should hurry and jump on that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one more headline, but I want to get to this question in the chat about Bobby Miller. Not this week's news, but he was sent down shortly before the break. And so I imagine people would be wondering, should we be stashing him? If anybody gave up on Bobby Miller after he was dropped, of course, he's had a tough year. He got hurt almost right away, came back, didn't look good, and looked so bad, actually, that he was sent to the minors again just before the break. Worth a stash in a situation where we don't know when he's coming back? I would imagine in a particularly deep league, the upside for Bobby Miller, if you get him for the final 3-4 weeks of the season, or maybe much more, is worth it. That you're probably doing it if somebody gave up in a 15-teamer, but a 10-teamer like we're looking here, do you think there's the upside? Would you do it?
The upside is he can be really good in any format, basically, and I don't really see the stuff, being down that much with him. It seems like a command thing that he's really struggling with. That makes me think that he can bounce back. But as you mentioned, 10 teams, pretty shallow. On the other, if you're thinking about it from another perspective, with it in a 10-team league, those are the kinds of risks you can take, and you can just quickly move on if it doesn't work out. So sure, if you have the roster space, go ahead and stash him. I still have, I don't know about you, I still have some long-term high hopes for Bobby Miller. Not necessarily in 2024, given how things have gone, but still optimistic about him over the long haul.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with the idea that it doesn't look like he's a significantly worse pitcher, but it might take the rest of this year to figure things out. I would say my only hesitation about stashing him would be a roster construction one. In a lot of those 10-team leagues, they're daily moves leagues. And in those leagues, what I want to do is basically use my whole bench rotating through whatever starting pitcher is healthy this day. I load up on relievers and then basically ignore the bench. I don't need hitters on the bench because I've got everyday hitters. And if I'm rotating a bunch of extra starters, I just might not have a spot to use on a guy who could be stuck in the minors for 1 week or could be stuck in the minors for 10. So it's a roster construction thing. But I think if you are in a spot where you have a free roster spot, I think Bobby Miller is a perfectly fine use of it. One more headline to get to. Jacob Wilson was going to be one of our top names in the priority ads section, an exciting young prospect for Oakland who's got great hit tool. Not sure if there's any power there, but a great hit tool and a path to playing time. We were going to spend quite a bit of time on Jacob Wilson, but he strained his hamstring in his major league debut. He's yet to be put on the IL, but it looked like a strain. And if it is a strain, that's more than 10 days. He'll be gone for at least a few weeks. So tough one there. But what were you going to say about Jacob Wilson? How excited should we have been? And if you're in a situation where it makes sense to add him anyway and not use him until he comes back from the injury, maybe it's some sort of keeper league where he wasn't rostered, but you can get him now. I don't know the exact circumstances, but should we like Jacob Wilson, injury aside?
Yeah, it's a bummer because I really wanted to see how what he was doing in the minors, which was just absolutely absurd, was going to translate. Because he has been viewed pretty universally by prospect hounds as a very much a floor guy, not really any standout tool other than the hit tool. But I mean, his numbers that he put up in the minors were just absolutely absurd. And how is that going to translate at the big league level? Are major league pitchers going to be able to exploit things more easily than pitchers in the minors? You have to assume that would be the case for a certain degree. And he's not a stolen base guy. He's not really a power guy. And what power he does have can be kind of thwarted by his home environment. Not a good lineup to be in. So there are certainly marks against him, but I just keep looking at those minor league numbers and they're insanely good. And he was a top 10 draft pick last year. So I don't know. It's a bummer. We only got to see him get one plate appearance, which he got a hit in that one plate appearance, by the way, and scored a run, and that's how he got injured. But I mean, I would still like to roster him. I hope that the strain isn't terribly bad. Like you said, we're still waiting to find out. He's not officially on the injured list yet. Certainly looked like a probable injured list stint, but yeah, I'm hoping we're still going to see a lot of Jacob Wilson in the second half, but we'll kind of TBD on that.
Yeah. All right. That's going to wrap up our headline section. Maybe we'll hear more Jacob Wilson on a pickup show a few weeks from now, but let's move on to our priority FAAB ads. These are going to be players who are available in at least half of your shallower leagues. Some of them also will be players who are available in nearly all of your deeper leagues as well. We just see them as potential priorities who are going to be added kind of everywhere this weekend. Although, again, like I mentioned at the start of the show, it's a weird week in terms of total games played since our last pickup show. Each team's played about 2, so there's not a whole lot of stats changing. So what you're going to hear today is a mix of guys who didn't get covered last week, maybe some guys who Ryan would have talked about, but he was out of town. We had, I guess, Jake Hallisker instead. We'll have some of those guys, and then we had to dig a little bit deeper for some guys maybe a little bit further out. Which means, hey, if you hate every name recommended here, you can listen to last week's show as well. I bet a bunch of those guys are still good. But with that out of the way, Ryan, who is your first priority pitcher of the week?
Yeah, a guy we haven't seen in a while, but finally looking like we could see him soon. Max Meyer of the Miami Marlins. I guess it's tomorrow, I think, is the cutoff line. The Marlins will get an extra year of control over him if they keep him in the minors through that date. And shockingly, you're hearing increased buzz that now they're probably going to bring him up next week. He's suddenly shown enough in the minors. It looks like that he's going to earn the promotion.
Worked on his defense.
Needed to work on that, the pitcher's fielding practice for sure. Upped his workload at his last 3 starts at AAA. He was supposed to pitch yesterday, but that start got rained out. So I guess he's going to pitch today, which means Thursday would be the first day he could come up. But yeah, the Marlins were limiting him to like 3-4 innings initially, but he's upped that workload. Last few starts, 6 innings, 2 starts ago, 5 innings his last time out. Last 11 starts at AAA Jacksonville. He's got a 3 ERA, 46 to 16 strikeout to walk rate over 42 innings. And you remember back in April, I guess, looked really good at the major league level in 3 starts, 2.12 ERA, 14 to 3 strikeout to walk rate in 17 innings. The workload has been scaled back enough at the minor league level, both in terms of how much he pitched over the last, 6-8 weeks. And also they built in a little bit of a break after they optioned him. So first year coming back from Tommy John surgery, it seems like I don't know if they're going to straight up let him loose in the second half, but he's probably going to have at least 5-6 innings available in most of his starts, I would think. And he's a premium prospect. He's already shown he can be successful at the major league level. Not a great team, obviously, that he's on, but is pitching in a great park. And I think Max Meyer, last check in Yahoo leagues, 31% rostered. Once he officially gets called back up, that number is probably at least going to double, triple. So go ahead and hop in now and scoop Max Meyer back up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've gone with him in this section several times. We're big fans of the talent, and I guess we should have just seen it coming from the start that this was a service time manipulation game. I think they just were going to have to wait so long, and when they initially sent him down, it looked like that wasn't necessarily the plan. It seemed believable that he could be back within a month, and then when there were rumors that, oh yeah, he's getting close, that seemed believable too. It seemed believable at every point of the season that the Marlins would want Max Meyer in the rotation next week. But it seems like the unfortunate service time manipulation plan was what was happening all along, it seems like. Or maybe the Marlins entertained the idea of bringing him back, and then they fell so far out of the race that they decided it wasn't worth it. But in any case, one of the more talented pitching prospects before his injury. We're about to see him. Go get him and probably make a real bid in places where you have to, I think. Not sure what kind of money's left on the table this time, but it might go at least 5 to 7% if I had to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Especially if you want to make sure you want to get him, maybe even a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. There's not going to be a ton of talent that enters the pitching pool and just dominates. Of course, it'll depend on the status of all the aces coming back from major injuries, the Clayton Kershaws, Kodai Senga, Robbie Ray, Jeffrey Springs. I think all of those guys either we talked about last week or are on too many rosters to make the cut for this week's show, but we'd certainly be taking a look at them as well. My next starting pitcher here is Ryne Nelson, who is not somebody I've been a big fan of in the past, but I've sort of noticed that the stuff people, the people who like that sort of pitching analytics have always seemed to be higher on Ryne Nelson than I was, and higher on him than his numbers say they should be, you might think. It's got at least decent stuff. I'm looking at Stuff Plus. It's always liked his fastball as at least slightly above average, and for a starter, that's pretty good. His Stuff Plus for his career is an even 100, which again, a lot of relievers are over 100, a lot of starters just under. But he's somebody who really hasn't struck anybody out for his career, a 16.5% strikeout rate, 17% this season. So I'm not really sure why a guy with pretty good stuff and good command as well can't miss bats. He did just miss 9 bats, or they struck out 9 batters, I should say, against the Cubs in his latest start. That adds to a run of now 7 outings in which he has a 3.29 ERA, 3.56 xFIP over that stretch. 35 strikeouts in 41 innings, a little bit less than 1 per inning, not quite as exciting as you want, but Ryne Nelson looks like somebody who's had potential for a bit, maybe starting to put things together in the middle of his second full season. I wouldn't get too far ahead of myself, but given that there's been low-level Ryne Nelson interest for a while now, and he's starting to show a little something, I think I might want to see where this goes. So it's not a very high bid for me, maybe a 2 to 3%er, but somebody who I think is more worth a look than what his career or his season numbers suggest.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you in that I was never really much of a Ryne Nelson fan, but some smart people in the industry did seem to like him more than me, so caused me to take a second look at him. I do wonder, I mean, given how good he's been lately, I've got to imagine he's got a fairly secure grip on a rotation spot, but they also have Jordan Montgomery's going to be back next week. Merrill Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez probably back in the next month, maybe a little sooner than that. So at some point he might shift to the bullpen, but for now, while he's making starts, especially in favorable matchups, definitely would be willing to stream him. My next guy, we're at the point of the year as we approach the trade deadline where it's a good time to look into relievers that are not currently closing, but could be closing soon. And you hear Pete Fairbanks' name being bandied about on potential trade rumors. The Rays have already made 1 trade. Seems like they might make more. I have Jason Adam as a potential pickup. 1.67 ERA, 0.79 whip, 44 to 14 strikeout to walk rate in 43 innings. He's been one of the best relievers in baseball again this season, just as he has been for the last 3 years or so. Unscored upon in his last 13 innings, 16 to 3 strikeout to walk rate over that span, and has allowed just 2 hits. So he's red hot as well. And I don't know that they're going to trade Pete Fairbanks. It seems like a very Rays move to trade him. They think they can cycle through basically all of their relievers and still be successful. And Jason Adam could very well get traded as well.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure, whether he's going to be traded or Pete Fairbanks is. But the good news is Jason Adam is so good that even if he doesn't wind up getting a bunch of saves, he's probably going to be better than the last starting pitcher on your roster anyway, more valuable. So he's at 44% at last check in Yahoo League. So I think he should be maybe not universally rostered, but pretty close to it. He's a sneakily valuable guy to have, even if he's not getting saves. And if him and Fairbanks still are both still on the Rays post trade deadline, probably still going to get a handful of saves anyway. And even if he doesn't, still going to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, those daily moves leagues where you have an incentive to add a couple extra relievers who just sit in your pitching spots every day. That's especially a good place to have Jason Adam. But like you said, there's a chance he's a great closing option down the stretch everywhere. While we're on the topic of relievers, I did want to address this quick question in the chat. Someone asked, is Jose Alvarado a drop? Will the Phillies bring in a closer replacement? Alvarado's been in a slump lately, and maybe in certain leagues that are shallow enough you could drop him. But on the topic of a closer replacement, I think it's more just that the Phillies don't actually have a closer, and they never did. They've just gave Alvarado more than half of the saves when he's pitching well, but if he's not pitching well, he's going to slip to getting less than half of them. And Jeff Hoffman probably will lead the committee, but I don't see the Phillies abandoning the committee and appointing Hoffman as the regular guy or bringing in someone from outside. I would be totally unsurprised if they brought in someone from outside and that cut into Alvarado's save chances even more. But I'm anticipating the team to continue mixing and matching all year.
Yeah, as the resident Phillies guy, you have a better handle on that situation than me, but I'm on the same page as you. I mean, I would already rather roster Hoffman anyway, I think.
Yes. I think he's on too many teams to fit the thresholds we use for these shows. Otherwise, I think I would have had him on there. But I would prioritize Jeff Hoffman over the guys we're talking about. But I'd be happy also with Hunter Harvey, who's the next guy on the list here. Harvey was just traded from the Nationals to the Royals last weekend. He's not yet officially been named the Royals closer, don't believe, but the odds that the Royals traded for him with no intention of giving him a shot at stealing the job seem low to me. James McArthur does not have very closer-like numbers this season, a 3.99 ERA, a 1.30 whip. Hunter Harvey was stuck behind Kyle Finnegan, who many people assumed Harvey would take the job from within a month or something at the start of the year, but Finnegan has had a great season. He's looked very closer-esque, 2.45 ERA, 1.02 whip for him. So if you've been holding out hope that Harvey was eventually going to take the job from Finnegan and you have Harvey on your bench, great. I think you can keep him there, and I think you're likely to finally get some save chances. I think that Harvey will be given the chance to take the job from McArthur, and I think if he's given it, I think he will take it. Should mention that Harvey was slumping a little bit before the trade, so maybe the Royals want to see him get back to right. He's now up to a 4.20 ERA on the season, but over the last 3 years, it's a 28% strikeout rate against a 6% walk rate. Very much looks like a high leverage reliever does Hunter Harvey, one who wouldn't necessarily close for teams with an even better closer, but who could definitely close for a team with James McArthur in the 9th inning. So I'd go get Hunter Harvey. I think I'd prioritize him decently, especially, of course, if he gets a save this weekend, you're going to have to bid very high to get him, I would imagine, because that would be proof that he's a closer down the stretch. But even without that proof, I'd still be making a real bid, I think, over somewhere between 5 and 10%, a 6 to 8 or so. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess maybe a little higher on James MacArthur and his chances of keeping the job. But I do think Harvey is more talented. I mean, it's mainly just been a health thing for him. He's had such a long history of elbow problems, but he's had a pretty lengthy stint of being healthy now. So hopefully he's past that. And I do think he is the most talented guy in that bullpen now. More closer talk. Yimi Garcia back from the IL. Speaking of elbow issues, his was a nerve elbow issue, so I'm a little less concerned about a guy coming back from that. But he is back in the Toronto bullpen now. Is he back to closing? That's the question. Will he, even if he is, will he continue to close through the trade deadline? He is an impending free agent, could be dealt. So this isn't a terribly highly likely rest of season closer, but still could have value, especially over the next couple of weeks. Having a fantastic season, 2.57 ERA, 37-7 strikeout to walk rate in 28 innings, and he's picked up 5 saves along the way. I mean, I guess there's a non-zero chance that he could even close for the team that would trade for him anyway. So Yimi Garcia, if you're looking for potential save stashes, I think he should be back on your radar for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there. So lots of options if you're looking for saves this week. Let's move to the hitters. And did I say we're going to go with some stashes this week? Because let's start with Matt McLain. We got the news that he is going to start a rehab assignment about 3 weeks from now. So that's earlier than I would stash on some teams. Definitely, if you are sitting out there and realizing McLain's on the waivers, it's not automatic that you should go get him. It depends on your situation. You're going to be waiting a little bit to get him here because, again, the rehab assignment won't start until mid-August. It could be a fairly long one. So maybe we're not even looking at anything until September 1st. Maybe this is a bit too early for McLain. And, of course, if somebody got hurt now, and you were told he's going to be out until September 1st, maybe you'd be dropping him, of course. So very, very team specific. But in certain circumstances, Matt McLain is going to give you the potential to be a big boost down the stretch, particularly, hey, if you're in a league with playoffs. Well, if you're going to make the playoffs, why not get a guy who was drafted, top 100 a lot of places. It was a very exciting middle infielder, eligible at second and short too. Somebody people were very high on heading into the year. If you're in a league with playoffs and he's still out there and you have the luxury to stash him now, you're going to get a very exciting middle infielder in a great park for the key playoff matchup. So definitely depends on the circumstance. There are leagues where I would leave Matt McLain on the wire for 3 more weeks, but there are leagues where I know he's going to help me a lot and I can afford to wait. And now that we finally actually have some sort of real timeline, it's August 12th. They say the rehab assignment is going to come. Now that we have something more concrete, we can start to make plans and figure out, does he actually make sense for our specific setup? So he's somebody who you probably just sneak in for cheap and only on some teams. But if you do, and it makes sense to you, could be a big help exactly when you need it.
Yeah, I think those head-to-head leagues where you can get him back for playoff matchups would be ideal if you're in that format. It might depend a little bit on where the Reds are at that point as far as the speed with which they activate him. So keep an eye on that. But certainly Matt McLain has the potential to be a difference maker down the stretch. One guy who's been certainly a difference maker in the stolen base department this season, Jose Caballero from the Rays. With the aforementioned Yandy Diaz news, could see his playing time tick back up. It had gone down since Taylor Walls came back. Walls has been prioritized at shortstop over Caballero. He still played a good amount, bouncing around from mostly second base and some other spots. But with one additional infield spot opened up with the Rays, Caballero could play even more, at least in the immediate future. He leads the American League with 24 stolen bases this season. Also been caught a league leading 11 times. I mean, you'd like the efficiency to be better than that, but another way of looking at it is he's basically just running anytime he gets on base, which us fantasy managers very much enjoy. Triple eligible at shortstop, second base, and third base. He's not going to offer much beyond those stolen bases. But I mean, he's hitting for not like a average that's going to tank you. Chips in with a handful of home runs. But you're basically just buying him for the stolen bases and the fact that he's triple eligible. You can stick him in a variety of spots. So would be nice to see him play a little bit more. And that could happen in the immediate future with Yandy Diaz out. So Jose Caballero, especially if you're in the need for some speed, should be scooped back up.
Yeah, absolutely. Useful role player, nothing more than that. But if you need the role, if you need that speed, you guys tied for third in the majors in stolen bases, despite not even being a qualified hitter. So can certainly help out a few teams. You'll know whether or not you're one of those, I would imagine. The next hitter here, Juan Yepez. Do we get to call him an ex-Cardinals outfielder, even though he's mostly a first baseman? If we do, throw all your money at him because he's about to take off. Yepez, he looked pretty good as a rookie 2 years ago in half a season for the Cardinals. Hit 12 homers with a 107 WRC plus, a slightly above average bat, but not necessarily enough above league average to make up for the fact that he wasn't much of a defender. And when he took a step back at the plate last year, basically a complete lost season, only 28 major league games, and he did effectively nothing in them. Was not great in the minors either, so he was non-tendered. Spent the first half of this season at the AAA level with the Nationals, where he was nothing special, slightly above average bat, but he's been getting chances since shortly before the break. He's up to 11 games now. Just his first homer of the season yesterday. He's now hitting .390 with a 1078 OPS, and this is definitely not who Juan Yepez is. But if you look at his numbers across his 3 partial seasons together, we're looking at a guy who's got 15 homers in 115 games. So that's roughly 3/4 of a season. He's got 15 homers. That's 20 to 25 homer pop. He's hitting .257 with a 109 WRC plus for his career. You dig under the hood a little bit more. It's a strikeout rate that's a hair under 23%, so basically right on league average there. A barrel rate of 8.5%, a hair above league average there. Basically, we're looking at a league average bat or slightly better. And when you combine that with the fact that he's first base /DH/ maybe left field, you can see why he doesn't necessarily get extended run at the major league level for a good team. But a guy like this who really isn't a bad hitter at all, when he's getting the opportunities and he's getting the chance to play every day on a lineup that's as barren as Washington's, sure, a slightly above average with tons of playing time is pretty useful for our game. And I don't know how long Yepez will keep it up, but I think he's good enough. I thought that when he went to Washington in the first place that he might have the potential to beat out, it's just not a very imposing group of teammates here. He's got to beat out for playing time. Joey Gallo, Harold Ramirez, Ildemaro Vargas. That's the rest of our depth chart at first base. So I think Yepez should be able to keep a job as long as he's at least fine. And I think that's useful in a lot of places.
Yeah, non-tendered, even though he wasn't even ARB eligible yet, which gives you an idea how, I guess, ready the Cardinals were to move on. I mean, he's still pretty young. And prior to last year, some really big numbers at the AAA level and AA level, and he did finish strong last year too at the AAA level if memory serves. I as a Cardinals fan, I was a fan of Yepez not that long ago, and as you mentioned, good landing spot in Washington. I've actually little surprised it took this long for him to get an opportunity, but certainly making the most of it now. Joey Gallo looks like he's going to probably be ready for a rehab assignment before long, but is Joey Gallo guaranteed anything when he comes back? He certainly shouldn't be.
Right.
Certainly while Yepez is hitting like he is, he's not going to be put on the bench. So
yeah, that would be my read.
Worth a shot in deeper leagues for sure. Another guy who I think is probably worth picking up again, Eugenio Suarez, is suddenly hitting for the Diamondbacks. 1057 OPS, 4 home runs, 16 RBI, and 14 games so far in July. All 4 of his home runs have come over the last 9 games. He had a 591 OPS entering July. Nearly lost his job. It seemed like the Diamondbacks were maybe going to give Blaze Alexander a shot at third base for a while, but Blaze Alexander is now in the minors, and the ever inconsistent Eugenio Suarez is on the right side of that up and down journey he usually takes us on. So, I mean, while he's hot, he can be helpful. Last 3 seasons, he averaged 28 home runs and 87 RBI. So he's a legitimate power hitter. And while he's making enough contact, while he's getting the playing time, if you're in need of a third baseman, if you're in need of a little pop, I think he's worth scooping back up for sure.
Yeah, one of these slumps will be Suarez's final slump as an everyday player, but it looks like it wasn't the most recent one, so still certainly useful in some places. Wrapping out the priority ads here, this guy is a little bit different type of priority ad. Coby Mayo. I'm including him this week because of the timing with the trade deadline coming up in about a week and a half. Coby Mayo has yet to make his major league debut, but he is one of the top prospects in baseball. He is the 7th best prospect, according to James Anderson's top 400 here at RotoWire. Blocked by an excellent Orioles infield for sure. So is that going to resolve itself in the next 2 weeks? I think it will in some way. I think it's going to resolve itself either with the Orioles moving somebody else out of the way so that they can have Coby Mayo be a part of their roster as they try to win the division down the stretch, or they're going to deal Coby Mayo for a piece, probably a pitching piece of some kind. Basically, I think Coby Mayo has a very good chance to finally get his opportunity in August. If he doesn't, I guess it'll come in September. He looks pretty big league ready and somebody who could get the chance after rosters expand. In 66 AAA games this year, he's hit 19 homers while hitting 303 with a 984 OPS. So again, one of the top prospects in baseball. He's been blocked throughout the first half, but we're almost at the deadline. I would expect him to become unblocked in some way. So I think I'd be taking that shot right now. Go to stash him wherever I can.
On August 1st, what's the percentage chances that Coby Mayo is the White Sox third baseman and Garrett Crochet is in Baltimore?
Reasonable.
I'm trying to think what other pitcher would be worth dealing Coby Mayo for. Right. I mean, there's always a pitcher that winds up, or a big player that winds up getting traded that no one was ever really thinking about. So that's certainly a possibility, but Garrett Crochet seems on the surface like probably right now of the names we're hearing about the only one that would be worth dealing Coby Mayo for. But I'm with you. I think he's in one way, shape, or form, he's going to be getting regular bats. I mean, you could make an argument he should be with the Orioles already.
Yeah.
Put Jordan Westburg at second base, put Coby Mayo at third. Of course, then you have Jackson Holliday to think about. Jackson Holliday hit a couple home runs yesterday, by the way. So maybe he's working his way back into the Orioles' immediate plans. We'll see, but it's going to be fascinating to see what the Orioles do because they still have just an embarrassment of riches from a position player perspective, and probably could use a frontline starter if they're going to try to win a World Series, which they certainly are capable of doing.
Yeah, there's one other name in the chat that was thrown out as a major pitcher who could theoretically move, Tarek Skubal. There's buzz about that. I think it's unlikely. If I'm the Tigers, I'm trying to win next year, and I want Skubal as part of it. But maybe if something happens, maybe that's where Mayo could go. We are going to get to our budget buys right after this ad and a little game from Draftkings Pick6. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds, or I know it'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter. If you have, then you're going to love Pick6, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings Pick6 app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in Pick6 credits. That's code RWPicks for new customers to play $5 and get 50 in Pick6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. I think I nailed it this week. And with that, we're going to play our weekly Saturday game where we're going to offer 6 Pick6 picks. Seems like a good number, given the name, for tonight's slate. And if you're watching us live, you can play along. And if you are catching this in the recording, you can laugh at everything we got wrong, starting with your first pick, Ryan.
Going with Matt Chapman, over 6.5 fantasy points. Giants are in Colorado. Kyle Freeland is on the mound. He throws with his left hand. Matt Chapman has a 936 OPS against lefties this season. Hasn't been a great year overall for Chapman, I would say, but still crushing lefties, still hitting the ball hard. And he is in Coors Field facing a, at best, mediocre starter. And 6.5 is not a super high total. I'm going to take the over on that.
All right. I am looking at your Cardinals, Ryan. I am looking at your Cardinals because they get to face Bryce Elder tonight, and I'm not very intimidated by Bryce Elder. And of these Cardinals picks, well, so our Pick6 page likes this one. Over half a hit for Nolan Gorman. That one's pretty interesting because Nolan Gorman hits 206. He gets less than half a hit, quite a lot. But Bryce Elder doesn't miss any bats. Gorman's going to have the platoon advantage. I guess I'm most scared here that Elder retires Gorman the first time through the order and then gets knocked out of the game and they bring in a lefty and Gorman leaves. Something like that. There's ways this could go wrong, but I'm picking on Bryce Elder with Nolan Gorman over half a hit.
And I believe Gorman's out of the lineup for the first game of the doubleheader, so that means he's probably going to play the second one. So
I thought you were telling me he's out of lineup for the night game already. Oh, no.
I'm going to pick on Kyle Freeland again. I got Jorge Soler over 5.5 fantasy points. Again, not a great year for Jorge Soler on the whole, but still hitting lefties, 825 OPS this season versus left-handed pitching. Also been batting leadoff for the Giants, so, I mean, he's going to get pretty good chance of 5 plate appearances. I'm fairly bullish that he can squeeze out at least 6 fantasy points with 5 plate appearances against a mediocre starter at Coors Field.
All right, and I am going to go back to picking on Bryce Elder. I don't think he's going to strike anybody out. I'm going to take less than, was it 5.5 strikeouts, 4.5 for Bryce Elder. He's got a 15% strikeout rate on the season. I'm going to pick on him as much as I can. I like doubling up here. And Pick6, you got to pick from at least 2 games, but no reason you can't have a couple line up where you pick on the same guy twice. So I'm picking on Bryce Elder again, going less than on his strikeouts.
I'm going with Tyler O'Neill, my third pick. I got the over 5.5 fantasy points. Rabelski, lefty rookie, starting for the Dodgers tonight. Good prospect, but Tyler O'Neill has crushed lefties this season, 1053 OPS, 6 home runs in just 96 plate appearances. Rabelski, not great his first start in the majors. I don't know if you saw the highlights. Tyler O'Neill did have a bit of a flub on the bases last night.
Right.
So I guess there's a chance he might get benched like Ali Marmol did with him last year. But if he's in the lineup, I like him to hit the over on the 5.5 fantasy points tonight.
All right. And let's look for one more. Looking at the Phillies against the Pirates here. They've got Luis Ortiz, who's somewhat interesting, but not scary enough to keep me off the Phillies' best bats. Now, I like the hits plus runs plus RBI one, but I like when that's set at 1.5, because if you get more than 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI, it's not that hard to do. You have a good game, a single RBI single. That's good enough. Some of the best bats for the Phillies, though, it's set at 2.5, so it's a little bit scarier to me. But how about Brandon Marsh? He gets the platoon advantage, 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI. I'm going to go more there. I don't think it should be too hard for Marsh to either get 2 hits or an RBI single or an RBI and a run scored against Luis Ortiz here. So that's going to wrap up our Pick6 picks. And let's move on back to FAAB. We're now up to our budget pitchers. Ryan, who is your first budget arm of the weekend?
I've got River Ryan from the Dodgers. Sounds like he's going to be up for his debut next week, potentially as soon as Monday against the Giants. Seems to be a wide range of opinions as far as his status as a prospect. I know James Anderson has him like just inside the top 200. I want to say Keith Law has him as like a top 30, top 40 prospect. I know there's some people that think he has pretty high ceiling, and most people acknowledge that he's at least a good prospect. So interested to see what his debut looks like. Missed the first 2 months of the season with shoulder fatigue, but since coming back, 2.22 ERA, 32-8 strikeout to walk rate in 24 1/3 innings. He's at a high pitch count of just 67 this season, so he's not going to be a workhorse by any means. He's a almost 26-year-old former position player, so kind of a unique background. But if we've learned anything over the years, it's that you should probably trust the Dodgers when it comes to evaluating and getting the most out of talented arms. I don't know how long River Ryan's going to stick around, but in your budget buy section, he definitely makes sense as an addition.
Yeah, I definitely would add him and see where it goes, although it might go to a bunch of 4-inning starts or something like that, unfortunately. My next guy here is Tyler Phillips, who right now is the 5th starter for the Phillies. I'm not sure he's going to be able to hold on to that long term, but Spencer Turnbull's still out for a little while, and Taijuan Walker doesn't look like he's necessarily about to return from his finger issue. So it's now Tyler Phillips getting the chance. It was Michael Mercado briefly. And it's probably only for a couple more starts until Walker comes back. But, you know, the Phillies down the stretch, they've had a couple of their veterans dealing with back issues, Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez, both of them dealing with back issues right now, not serious enough to send them to the IL. But you can't help but wonder, with the team sitting pretty comfortably, do they go to a 6-man? Do they do some not quite phantom IL, but soft IL stints for guys like Wheeler and Suarez, just to make sure they're set for October? And so if there's a pathway here for a more permanent spot, that makes Phillips more interesting. Now, he's not a great pitcher. I shouldn't pretend that he is. We're talking about a 26-year-old who was a 16th round pick back in 2015. He's been bouncing around in the minors ever since then. Wasn't even dominant at the AAA level either. A 4.89 ERA in 15 starts. So this is really about the fact that he'll pitch for the Phillies, which is a team that gives you a pretty good chance at some wins. Unfortunately, they've got a tough home park, which is not ideal. But they also are developing a reputation for actually improving pitchers, and that's the other reason I'm including him here. 2-3 years ago, definitely wouldn't have. I would have said somebody goes to the Phillies, you're looking at the worst possible park and a team that's not going to make them any better. I don't think that's the case anymore. The Phillies are actually not bad. They're actually making players better. And in his 2 outings so far, it's 1 long relief outing and 1 start. 4.50 ERA in 10 innings, so 5 earned runs in 10 innings, but 12 strikeouts against no walks is enough of a positive sign here that I want to take a chance on Tyler Phillips. If you can add him today, you could use him tomorrow versus the Pirates. Then you might have to have a question about using him against Cleveland after that, and we'll see where it goes. So again, there's the potential that this doesn't really end up helping you out at all, Tyler Phillips, but there's a little bit of upside here on a good team and a good organization and somebody who's at least shown something right after making his debut. So add Tyler Phillips with low expectations, but there's a chance you get an interesting back-end starter for a couple months.
Yeah, and Caleb Cotham, we trust.
Exactly.
I'm gonna double up with another Tyler here. Tyler Mahle, kind of a blast from the past, and he's not the first guy you think of as far as rehabbing Rangers starters, but still a pretty darn good pitcher in his own right. Has not allowed a run in his first 3 rehab starts. He's gone just 6 2/3 innings total in those 3 rehab starts, but does have an 8-1 strikeout to walk rate. Went 2 2/3 innings his last time out and struck out 5. So still needs to be built back up. Probably looking at 2 or 3 weeks before he's ready, I would say, but has the potential to pay some dividends down the stretch. 210 strikeouts back during the 2021 season for Mahle. Since that year, he's put up a 3.94 ERA, over 326 in the 3rd innings. He has 364 strikeouts. So extreme fly ball pitcher, but he's a bat misser, proven bat misser. He is coming back from Tommy John. You never know exactly how that's going to work out, but I think he's kind of a sneaky little stash that not that many people are talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. We've mentioned a bunch of other injured pitchers, but Mahle deserves a mention as well. We mentioned a bunch of relievers. I'm throwing one budget reliever out here. Shelby Miller. He got a save for the Tigers shortly before the break. And I guess Tyler Holton went and got one last night. So we could have just completed the Tyler trio if I'm throwing out different Tigers relievers. But I think Miller is vaguely interesting here. 5.23 on this ERA on the season. Certainly not interesting for Miller, but that looks like some small sample reliever bad luck. 350 Sierra gives you a better idea of how he's pitched. An 0.92 whip. He's really keeping runners off the base paths well. Not striking out a ton of batters, but really not walking anybody, just a 5% walk rate. The other reason to be interested in Miller is that Jason Foley, if you remember all the excitement about him, he's just not that guy anymore. He was showing some strikeout stuff early in the season and was really dominating hitters. But if you look over just the last 3 months, so you basically take out the first 3 weeks of the season, his ERA jumps all the way up to 4.81. Even if you look at Foley's entire season, his strikeout numbers have fallen all the way down to 17%. So he does not look like somebody who needs to be the committee lead, I guess, is what he is, more than a true closer for the entire stretch run. I think there's every chance that Miller, who has plenty of experience and has looked good at times, moves ahead of Foley down the stretch, or the team could trade Foley. Even though he's fallen back, he could still be useful enough to be a 7th inning guy on a contender. So if you're looking for potential bullpen shakeups, again, we talked about our preferred options in the previous segment, but Shelby Miller, one maybe for deeper leagues where the likes of Jeff Hoffman and Hunter Harvey and Jason Adam might all be gone.
Yeah, as someone who has rostered Foley in a couple leagues, kind of a tough spot you're in because he's still getting some saves, still might be at the lead of the committee theoretically, but also might not be that good. So you don't really feel like you can drop him, but because somebody else is probably going to pick him up. But how much value is he ultimately going to bring to the table? Tough spot for Foley owners, but I'm with you that Shelby Miller makes sense as a potential alternative. Reed Detmers, I think, should be back on your radar. Been at AAA Salt Lake since early June. 7.11 ERA at AAA Salt Lake. Not great, but that's an incredibly difficult environment to pitch in. And you look at the strikeout to walk rate over 38 innings, it sits at 50 strikeouts and 12 walks. Very good there. Even when he was struggling earlier this season with the Angels prior to getting demoted, still struck out 70 batters in 63 innings. since the beginning of the 2023 season, 238 strikeouts in 211 and 2/3 innings. I don't know if I can ever quit Reed Detmers entirely. I'm certainly not ready to yet. I kind of wish the Angels would trade him to a new organization. I feel like he could maybe thrive with a fresh set of eyes on him. But I think either way, he's probably going to be back in the majors before long, and not easy to find that strikeout upside on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I am still a Reed Detmers guy, and I wonder, too, if he just needs a trade or something. I think, speaking of organizations and how they affect our opinion on a player, I think the Angels are not one of those who would improve our opinion on somebody. I think if we heard Reed Detmers got traded to any team with a positive reputation, I think all of us would be like, ooh, what are they going to do for Reed Detmers? But the other thing to keep in mind with Detmers is he's very young. He was promoted very quickly. It looks like he's had a pretty rocky start and might never figure it out, but he only just turned 25 less than 2 weeks ago. It was actually in July, so this is technically his age 24 season. If you remember, he was drafted in 2020. He debuted in 2021 after just a very small handful of minor league starts. I think it was maybe even a single-digit number of starts. If it wasn't single digits, it was like 12. He was not great as a rookie, but he looked better in his next year before maybe taking a step back.
You're telling me that the Angels rushed a prospect to the majors?
Exactly.
No way.
I think Detmers was the first of that group. It was Detmers and Zach Neto and Nolan Shanwell. It's a pattern they've been doing, and it might work out long term. But if you're seeing several years of struggles at the major league level for Detmers, well, yeah, it's because he arrived several years too early. So I think it's worth still keeping the faith for longer than you would for another player who's had the same stats but a more normal career path. We'll move on to the budget hitters right after this message from our friends at Homerun Forecast. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere, in fact, can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. Homerun Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Homerun Forecast Premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Homerun Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. And back here, wrapping things up with our budget hitters. And we would have had an interesting comparison between two rookie shortstops or middle infielders who got called up this week. But of course, as we talked about earlier, Jacob Wilson got injured in his very first game in the majors, but Brooks Baldwin of the White Sox at least deserves budget consideration. Baldwin, not a top prospect. I believe he's somewhere in the 200s at our site, so he's at least expected to have a legitimate major league career ahead of him. And guess what? He's on a team where you don't have to be all that good, the White Sox, to earn continued at-bats. If Brooks Baldwin is just barely viable, he will stick around in the majors the rest of the year, I would imagine. At second base, his top competition, Nicky Lopez. So basically just beat out Nicky Lopez, or even beat out Paul DeJong at shortstop. Neither of those things should be too difficult. Or if they want to move him to third, beat out Nick Senzel. You get the point. The bar at the White Sox to be an everyday player is incredibly low. Shouldn't be that hard for Baldwin to clear it, even if he's not an elite prospect. And, even if he's not an elite prospect, he's had pretty excellent numbers in the minors. Just had 8 AAA games this year, but in 74 games at the AA level, 6 homers, nothing special, 16 steals, but slashed 322, 386, 441 with a 18% strikeout rate there. So not an elite hit tool, not elite power. The whole picture is just more of a guy who's going to be useful enough playing a few spots around the infield and getting by at the plate. That's why he's nothing more than a budget buy here. But Brooks Baldwin, at least in deeper leagues where playing time really matters, there's a lot of playing time available, and all he has to do is be okay.
Yep, another guy ticking up in terms of playing time, Xavier Edwards. The Miami Marlins has been the everyday shortstop since Tim Anderson was jettisoned from that roster. And over that time, batting .367, 436 OBP, 429 slug, stolen 3 bases across 13 games. Look back at the minor league track record for Xavier Edwards, .313 batting average, just an 11.6% walk or strikeout rate, 10.5% walk rate, and good number of stolen bases as well. He has 0 power. He's not going to give you anything in that regard, but makes a lot of contact, has the potential to hit for a decent average, should steal some bases, and he's getting everyday playing time. Also, I believe should be at least double eligible, maybe between shortstop and second base. So Xavier Edwards at one time was a pretty highly thought of prospect and maybe didn't quite work out totally how he thought or hoped he would, but still has potential to hit for average and steal some bases, and he's getting everyday reps. So that's worth rostering in deeper formats.
Yeah. Xavier Edwards, no power, famously was criticized by Blake Snell on a Twitch stream and called a slapdick prospect when the team traded Tommy Pham for Hunter Renfroe and Xavier Edwards. Well, that was accurate scouting by Blake Snell, but Edwards has enough about him that should be able to carve out a major league career despite lacking any real power. Talking about shortstops who don't have any real power, here's one more for you. Leo Jimenez is now the shortstop for the Blue Jays, at least temporarily. This is a recommendation based on the Bo Bichette injury. It was Jimenez who'd been getting the opportunities. Addison Barger did just get called up when Bichette hit the injury list, so you could look at Barger as well, but Jimenez was the one getting the opportunities, so he's the one who earns the recommendation here. In 9 games, he's hitting .348, so good for him. Somebody who's got a pretty decent hit tool, with strikeout rates somewhere between 15 and 19% at most of his minor league stops. That's pretty good. Suggests he should be able to hold a league average strikeout rate or slightly better in the majors. Not a lot of power, though, but the projections are calling for nearly a league average bat. The Bat X and Zips both have him as a 97 WRC plus. Steamer down at 94. So Leo Jimenez should be an okay hitter, who's good enough defender to get the opportunities at shortstop while Bo Bichette is out. Really more of a deep league guy, especially given the fact that he probably won't have this playing time long term. But of course, after the trade deadline, if the Blue Jays move some pieces, there could be more available. Maybe you just want to add Barger, who was maybe more interesting as a prospect, but Jimenez is getting the chances first. So you need some playing time next couple weeks. Leo Jimenez can help you out there.
Former top catching prospect Joey Bart is going to be my final recommendation if you need some catching help. Playing time has been up for the Pirates, started 7 of 9 prior to the All-Star break and started their first game at catcher after the All-Star break. Hit a couple home runs during that span. He's got 6 home runs and 107 plate appearances this season. Strikeout rate at 28%, which is high, but actually down considerably for him. He was striking out at like a 34% rate with the Giants. Also has upped his walk rate to 11.2% this year with the Pirates. So showing a good amount of patience this year. Joey Bart's probably not going to be a difference maker at this point. Believe the Pirates or the Giants designated him for assignment before they ultimately traded him to the Pirates. So the prospect shine is basically completely gone from him, but there was a reason why he was a prospect at one point. He's got legitimate power, and he's hitting for some power now and playing regularly. So if you need a second fantasy catcher, I think looking Joey Bart's way makes some sense.
Yeah, I will move us to our final name of the day, but I want to give one more question in here to you because you missed last week's show. These are a handful of names that we did talk about last week in this question here. Better pick up Angel Martinez, Colt Keith, Lawrence Butler, or Jacob Wilson. I think we talked about Wilson with his hamstring injury. Probably not him, assuming that he is indeed heading to the injured list. But I believe we talked about all three of Angel Martinez, Colt Keith, and Lawrence Butler on last week's show. Do any of them stand out to you as particularly worth the pickup?
I think they all are to a certain degree. I probably lean Keith just because he's the only one of the four I think is definitely guaranteed playing time rest of season. I don't love the left-handed bat at Comerica Park, but he has been trending up lately. He's been batting second in the order for the Tigers a lot recently. Interested also with Angel Martinez and Lawrence Butler as well, but I think I would give the edge to Keith.
Yeah, I think that's a fair breakdown. Butler, maybe for me, I do like his power and speed. 9 homers, 6 steals in just under 200 plate appearances. Quick math, that translates to 27 and 18 if he got 600 plate appearances. He does have real pop, so there's something there with Butler, but maybe Keith a little bit more reliable. The final name here for today's show is apparently the number one on Billboard's Latin music charts. Jose Iglesias. He's got some hit song that I admittedly have not yet listened to, but good for him, Jose. Better than me at 2 different exciting professions. Not very good at recommending fantasy baseball pickups, though, I'm sure. But Jose Iglesias, a veteran who, if you thought he was out of the league by now, that would be reasonable because he didn't play any Major League Baseball games last year. And for most of the years before that, he was a below-average hitter who's, as a shortstop was good enough. It's actually remarkable if you look at his WAR totals. If I'm counting on the fly here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is the 9th season of his where he's between 1 and 2 WAR. So that's the kind of player Iglesias is. Not quite even a league average player, but good enough to keep getting opportunities and keep justifying his spot. And this year, he's doing way more than justify it. In 88 plate appearances, he's got a 1,006 OPS. A lot of BABIP luck helping him out there, but also has 3 homers, which is as many as he had last year in 2022 in 467 plate appearances. So he's on fire right now. He's making a ton of contact, just an 8% strikeout rate for Jose Iglesias. For his career, he's at 12%. So this is a legitimate skill for Iglesias. Seems locked in right now. He's playing a lot at second base for the Mets, who are hitting quite well these days. So I don't know about Jose Iglesias as a new man. Maybe his second career has revitalized him and he's somebody different now. But I think mostly he's good enough to hold down a spot. He's playing regularly for a team that's hitting pretty well, and he's making a ton of contact right now. So consider him if you need a second baseman.
Yeah, I don't know if he owes more to the late career breakout to his musical talents, or apparently him and JD Martinez are good buddies, and JD Martinez recommended that he do the Driveline weighted bat program, and that has apparently helped out his power. Although if you look at his StatCast numbers, it doesn't really seem to have made a ton of difference, at least from that.
Well, his barrel rate is 8 times as high as it was last year. It's gone up from 0.5% to 4%. So, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's trending up for sure. I don't know if I'm buying Jose Iglesias as a power breakout, but at least something interesting to note. And Jeff McNeil, while he did hit 2 home runs yesterday, has been terrible this year. Could Jose Iglesias get additional run at second base? Crazier things have happened, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to JD Martinez feature on the next hit single from Jose Iglesias. We'll see how that goes. That's going to wrap up our show for today. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, chatters and commenters. And we'll be back next week with another set of pickups. And I've got Lucas Beery tomorrow talking about how to play catch-up. What do you do if you're sitting, 5th or 6th? You got some ground to make up. We're going to try to help you out tomorrow here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast.